Marcus woke to the sound of rain against the metal roof of the old warehouse, where he slept each night. The building had been abandoned for decades, left behind when the town of Clearwater expanded toward the center of the colony settlement. He pulled his thin blanket around his shoulders and stared at the rusted panels above his head. Nobody wanted him here. That was the truth that had lived in Marcus's chest for 3 years, ever since the Jathul Empire had attacked the outer settlements and killed his family. His parents had died defending the colony, the elders said, but that did not matter to the people who lived here. When Marcus walked through the market square, shopkeepers turned away from him when he tried to find work. People said there were no positions available when he sat in the common hall during meals. Others moved their seats to other tables. The council had made their decision last week. Marcus would be sent to the outer mines on the eastern plateau, where the work was dangerous and the pay was nothing. He would go deep into the earth and pull out minerals that the colony needed to survive. He would do this until his body wore out and he became too weak to be useful. Then they would forget about him. Marcus had accepted this fate because he had learned long ago that his wishes did not matter. On the morning that changed everything, he woke early and decided to explore the area beneath the town. For 3 years, he had walked past the old caves that opened into the hillside behind the settlement, but nobody had ever told him to go inside them. That meant he was allowed to. He brought no light with him except for the pale gray light of dawn that filtered through the cave opening. The tunnel descended slowly at first, then more steeply. As Marcus moved deeper into the earth, his eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he began to see strange markings on the stone walls. They were not natural formations. Someone, or something, had carved them there long ago. The symbols meant nothing to Marcus, but they told him he was not the first person to walk this path after what felt like hours. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Marcus stopped and stared. The space was enormous, larger than any building in Clearwater, and at the center of it, enclosed within a cage of twisted metal and glowing panels, was a dragon. Marcus had never seen a dragon before. The history lessons taught in the colony school had mentioned them only briefly, saying they were extinct creatures from ancient times that had never truly existed in the way that stories describe. But here one was, lying coiled on the stone floor. The dragon was silver blue in color, with scales that shimmered faintly, even in the dim light that came from the cage itself. Strange markings covered its body in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, as if they told a story written across its skin. The creature's head was enormous, with long curved horns that spiraled upward, but what struck Marcus most was the dragon's eyes. When the creature opened them and looked at the human boy standing at the edge of the chamber, those eyes were intelligent and aware. They were also sad. The dragon did not move toward Marcus or make any sound. Instead, it watched him with an expression of such profound loneliness that Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. He understood that feeling, had lived with it for 3 years outside the cage. Resting on a stone pedestal was a single object, an old necklace made of woven silver and stone. The materials looked ancient, worn smooth by countless hands across countless years. Something in Marcus drew him toward. I did not know why he reached out, but he did the moment his fingers touched the silver. A voice flooded into his mind, not words, but feelings and images and memories that were not his own. He saw vast cities of crystal and light, saw stars burning in the darkness of space. He saw humans, smaller and weaker than they should have been, facing an enemy that seemed unstoppable. And he saw the dragon, powerful and beautiful, choosing to fight for them. The vision lasted only seconds, but when Marcus pulled his hand back, he was gasping as if he had been running. The dragon rose to its feet. The cage glowed brighter, and Marcus felt a wave of ancient power push against him from across the chamber. Then the dragon spoke. And this time, Marcus heard words in his mind, translated by something he did not understand. "I have waited so long," the voice said, and it carried all the weight of thousands of years, waiting for someone who would understand, waiting for a human who would touch this necklace and hear the truth. Marcus wanted to run. Every instinct told him that this was dangerous, that this dragon was a trap, that the cage existed because this creature was something evil that needed to be contained. But he did not run. Instead, he asked a single question that came from the deepest part of his heart, the part that had learned to recognize loneliness in others because he carried so much of it himself. "Why have you been waiting for me?" The dragon's eyes softened, and for a moment, Marcus saw something in them that looked like hope. "Because you are unwanted too," the dragon said, "and the unchosen are often the only ones brave enough to see the truth." Marcus stood in that chamber for a long time, one hand resting on the ancient necklace, staring at the dragon that nobody knew existed above him. The town of Clearwater went about its daily business, unconcerned with the secret that lay beneath their feet. Nobody noticed Marcus was missing by the time anyone thought to look for him. He would be back in the warehouse, lying under his thin blanket, touching the necklace hidden beneath his shirt and feeling the gentle presence of another mind that had finally found what it had been searching for: an answer to loneliness, a connection that nobody could break, a beginning to something that would change everything. Marcus returned to the cave every night for 2 weeks. Each time, he would leave the warehouse after the town had fallen asleep and make his way down the hill, following the path he had memorized on that first morning. Each time, the dragon was waiting for him. The creature never moved aggressively or tried to break free from its cage. Instead, it would simply watch as Marcus approached. And when the boy reached out to touch the necklace, the connection would deepen through the necklace. Marcus began to learn the dragon's story. The creature's name was Kaled, had existed for more than 5,000 years, though it could not remember what it had been like before the Great War that had changed everything. The war had been fought between the Galactic Council and a rising empire of conquerors called the Zathul. The Zathul had decided that humanity was weak and should be eliminated before it became a problem. They had attacked the first human colonies with overwhelming force for decades. The humans had fought and died. They had almost been completely destroyed. But then Kale had made a choice. The dragon had been bound by rules set down by the Galactic Council. The Council had demanded that all elder species remain neutral in conflicts between younger races. The younger races had to prove they were worthy of survival by fending for themselves. Kale was bound by ancient laws to follow these rules, but Kale had loved humanity in a way that the Council did not understand. Perhaps it was because humans were small and fragile, yet endlessly brave. Perhaps it was because Marcus's ancestors had shown the dragon kindness long before the Galactic Council had forbidden such things. Whatever the reason, Kale had made the hardest choice of its existence. The dragon had broken the sacred laws and fought against the Zathul for humanity's sake. For 50 years, Kale had stood alone against the invasion. The dragon had fought in ways that made the enemy afraid. It had protected human settlements and given them time to build weapons and defenses. It had refused to let humanity fall. Eventually, the Zathul had been defeated, not by the dragon, but by humans who had become strong enough to defeat them. Kale had asked for nothing in return. Dragon had only wanted to be left alone and to watch humanity grow and thrive. But the Galactic Council had discovered what Kale had done. The Council was furious that one of their own kind had broken the ancient laws. More than that, the Council was afraid. They feared the humans would remember Kale's sacrifice. They feared that this memory would make humans proud and bold. They feared that humans who knew they had been saved by an elder species would demand more help, would become dependent on outside aid. So the Council had made a terrible decision. They had imprisoned Kale in this chamber beneath the earth. They had locked the dragon away with powerful technology that suppressed its abilities, and they had erased the memory of what Kale had done from all the historical records that they controlled. They had hidden the truth so completely that even humans who lived in the colonies did not know that they owed their lives to this imprisoned dragon. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest when he learned this. It was not fair. Nothing in his life had been fair. But this was worse because it was a betrayal of something pure and good. Kale had given everything for humanity, and humanity had forgotten, had been forced to forget through the necklace. Marcus felt Kale's response to his anger. The dragon was not. Bitter Kale said that imprisonment was not a punishment that could break the dragon's spirit. The dragon had made the choice knowingly and would make it again. What had hurt was the loneliness, being locked away from everyone, unable to speak to another mind, unable to share what had happened. To bear witness to it, isolation was a worse prison than any cage made of metal and light. But now Kale was alone, no longer on the 14th night. Marcus noticed that people in the town were looking for him. He had been missing from his usual spots. And though nobody cared enough to be truly concerned, the council had noticed his absence. The head administrator, a stern woman named Patricia, had announced that Marcus's departure to the mines was being moved up. He would leave in 3 days instead of 1 week. The council had decided that a missing orphan boy was less important than maintaining order and schedules. Marcus knew what he had to do. He returned to the cave on the night before he was scheduled to leave. He touched the necklace and felt Kale's consciousness reach out to meet him through their connection. He asked the dragon a question that terrified him. "What if I freed you?" Response came not as words, but as a flood of caution and concern. Kale did not want Marcus to risk himself. The dragon knew that freeing an imprisoned creature from the Galactic Council would be seen as an act of treason. It would mean that Marcus would be hunted. It would mean a death sentence for the boy, but Marcus understood something that Kale didn't know. Had already been sentenced to a slow death in the mines. He had already been marked as an unwanted person by everyone around him. What did he have to lose? What good was a life if it was spent in darkness, pulling rocks from the earth, serving people who despised him? Better to spend whatever time remained to him doing something that mattered. Better to spend it freeing someone who had once sacrificed everything for others. Marcus pulled out a metal tool that he had stolen from a workshop the day before. Was not designed to break locks, but it was all he had. He approached the cage and began to work on the first seal. The metal glowed and hummed beneath his fingers. Kale guided him through the connection, telling him which mechanisms to press and how much force to apply. It took 3 hours of careful, intense work, but finally, Marcus heard a click. The first seal released. The cage dimmed slightly, and Marcus felt a wave of power flow through the connection he shared with Kale. For the first time in thousands of years, a small portion of the dragon's true strength had been restored through the necklace. Marcus felt Kale's emotion. It was gratitude and hope, and something deeper than either. It was the knowledge that someone finally understood. Someone finally cared enough to risk everything. Marcus heard footsteps above him in the tunnels. Those townspeople were beginning their morning routines. He had to leave the cave and get back to the warehouse before anyone discovered what he had done. Removed his hand from the cage and stepped back. Kale lowered its massive head. And for a moment, Marcus understood that this was not the gesture of a creature that was imprisoned. This was the gesture of one conscious being honoring another. Marcus made his way back through the tunnels, his heart pounding in his chest behind him. Deep in the darkness of that ancient chamber, a dragon that had waited 5,000 years for freedom felt hope kindle in its heart. For the first time since the seals had been placed, Kale was no longer completely alone, and there was a chance, however small, that the chains might eventually break. The alarms began to sound at noon the following day. Marcus was working in the town square, moving supplies from one building to another in exchange for a final meal before his departure. To the mines, the sound made every person stop and look up. It was a sound that nobody had heard since the early days of the colony. A warning that meant something ancient and dangerous had been awakened. The council's loudspeakers crackled to life. Across the town, all residents were ordered to shelter in place. An unauthorized excavation had been discovered in the hills. Dangerous artifact had been disturbed. Everyone was to remain calm and indoors. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He looked around at the panic beginning to ripple through the crowd. People were abandoning their work and running toward their homes. He saw Patricia, the council administrator, speaking urgently into a communication device as guards began to mobilize around the central building. They knew the alarms had detected Kale's power being released from the cage. The seals Marcus had broken had triggered sensors that the boy had not known existed. Everything he had tried to do in secret was now exposed. Guards began to move through the streets, checking identification, asking questions. Marcus knew he could not stay in the town. He turned and walked calmly toward the edge of the square, keeping his pace measured and natural. Nobody stopped him as he made his way toward the residential areas, ducked between buildings, and moved toward the route that would take him back to the caves. Behind him, he could hear the sound of vehicles starting, of boots on pavement, of shouting voices organizing a search. The council would be heading to the cave soon. If they found Kale in the sealed chamber, they would destroy the dragon. Marcus moved faster. He had almost reached the tunnel entrance when a voice called out behind him, "Wait." He turned to see a woman he recognized from the town library. Her name was Emma, and she was one of the few people in Clearwater who had ever spoken kindly to Marcus. She was older than him, perhaps in her 40s, with sharp eyes and hands stained with ink. "Where are you going?" she asked. "The council is sending everyone to shelter." Marcus hesitated. He could see that Emma had already guessed the truth. Her expression was not shocked or angry. It was understanding. "You were at the cave," Emma said. "Not a question. You found something there." Marcus nodded. "Slowly. Come with me," Emma said. "Not to the council, not to the guards, but with me. To my home. I have something you need to see for a moment." Marcus considered running for the tunnels instead, but something in Emma's voice told him to trust her. They moved quickly through the quieter streets toward the residential district. Emma's home was small, an old structure on the edge of town. She brought Marcus inside and locked the door behind them. Then she went to a cabinet and pulled out a thick book, bound in leather so old it was falling apart. "This," Emma said, "is a copy of the real historical records, not the ones the council allows to be taught. My family has kept this hidden for generations. We remember what was done." She opened the book and showed Marcus pages filled with writing in different hands. Some entries were dated centuries ago. They told the true story of what had happened. They described how the Zithul had nearly destroyed humanity. They described how a dragon named Kale had fought for 50 years to protect the human colonies. The dragon had asked for nothing except peace and the freedom to exist quietly, but the Galactic Council had feared that humanity would become too proud if they remembered the truth. They had feared that humans would demand the dragon's help against. So the council had imprisoned Kale and erased the history from all official records. Only families like Emma's, people who had chosen to remember, kept the truth alive. "We have been waiting," Emma said, "for someone to free the dragon. We knew it could happen someday. We have prepared for it." She showed Marcus a communication device. "This broadcasts across all settlements and stations. If you can get me information from the dragon, proof of what happened, I can tell the real story to everyone. I can make sure that the lie cannot hold." Marcus understood what she was offering. It was hope. It was a way to turn his act of rebellion into something that might actually change things. But first they needed to survive. The sounds of the search grew closer. Emma moved Marcus to a hidden chamber beneath her house. a space that had been built long ago by people who also had secrets to keep stay here. She told him, "I will gather what I can and meet you at the cave entrance when the guards have passed." Marcus waited in darkness, and through the necklace still hidden beneath his shirt, he felt Kale's fear and concern. The dragon was reaching out through their connection, trying to sense where Marcus was, whether he was safe. Marcus projected calm back toward the dragon. "Help is coming," he said through their bond. "Someone from above who remembers the truth." Kale's response carried hope. It also carried something else. It carried the weight of thousands of years of solitude and the desperate desire to believe that this time things might be different, that this time the truth would not be buried again, that this time an unwanted boy and an imprisoned dragon might finally be able to rest. Marcus made his way back to the cave as night fell. Emma had given him supplies and the communication device, promising to broadcast the truth as soon as she had proof. But first, Marcus had to reach Kale. The dragon had released more seals on its own throughout the day, fueled by the connection between the boy and the ancient creature through the necklace. Marcus felt Kale's power growing stronger. The dragon was no longer fully imprisoned, but it was still weakened from thousands of years of captivity. When Marcus reached the chamber, the cage hung open. Kale had broken free of the physical bonds, but the suppression technology still limited the dragon's abilities. The creature rose to its feet as Marcus entered, and the boy understood something crucial in that moment. Kale needed him for thousands of years. The dragon had been the strong one, the protector, the powerful being that had saved humanity. Now the roles had shifted. Marcus was the one who could move freely through the world. Marcus was the one who could navigate the complex social structures of human settlements. Marcus was the one who understood how people thought and felt. The boy approached the dragon without fear. He removed a necklace from beneath his shirt and held it in both hands. Kale lowered its massive head, and Marcus placed the necklace around the dragon's neck instead of his own. The connection that exploded between them was different from anything Marcus had experienced before. It was not Marcus reaching out to Kale anymore. It was a true merging of two minds. When their thoughts combined, something new emerged. Marcus suddenly understood the ancient technology that had been suppressing the dragon's power. He could see it not through human learning, but through Kale's ancient memories of how such things were built. More importantly, he understood how to disable it. Kale, in turn, felt what it was like to be human. The dragon sensed Marcus's fear and his courage existing together. Dragon felt the desperate hope that came from having nothing left to lose. The dragon understood, for the first time, what it meant to be small and fragile, but utterly unbending. Using this combined knowledge and courage, Marcus began to work on the suppression technology. Kale, though still physically weak, focused its will through Marcus. The boy's hands moved with precision that he did not know he possessed. The dragon's consciousness guided him past safeguards and falsifies. It took hours, but slowly the technology began to fail. When the final lock released, power flowed through Kale. The dragon rose to its full height. Caverns seemed to expand around the dragon's presence. Kale was free, but the alarms that had been silent for hours began to sound. Again, the soldiers were coming through the tunnels. Marcus heard the sounds of their approach. Kale could have flown away. The dragon's power had been restored enough to escape into the sky. But Kale did not move toward the tunnels that led to the surface. Instead, the dragon remained with Marcus. "We do not run," Kale said through their connection. "We stand." When the soldiers arrived at the chamber entrance, they found the dragon waiting. Commander Victoria was leading the force. She had brought weapons that were designed specifically to contain or kill large threats. But when she entered the chamber and saw Kale for the first time, she stopped. She had expected a monster. What she saw instead was a creature of terrible beauty and terrible sadness. The dragon did not attack. Instead, Kale simply looked at Victoria with ancient eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. Then the dragon did something unexpected. It roared. The sound was not violent or aggressive. It was a sound that carried all the pain of thousands of years of imprisonment, all the loneliness of isolation, all the hope that had just been kindled by meeting Marcus. The force of that sound knocked the soldiers backward, but they were not harmed. Kale had chosen precision over power. The dragon could have killed every soldier in that chamber. Instead, the dragon had merely warned them. Victoria realized something in that moment. She realized that if the dragon had wanted to kill them, they would all be dead. The creature did not want to fight. It wanted only to live freely. She began to understand that her orders might be wrong. She began to question whether she was on the right side. Marcus stepped forward and placed his hand on Kale's neck. The dragon lowered its head, and together they moved toward the tunnel entrance. The soldiers stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Victoria did not give the order to attack. She stood aside. Let them go. She said, I will not be responsible for executing a creature that has chosen mercy over power. A few of her soldiers disagreed. They raised their weapons, but Victoria stepped in front of them. That is an order. She said, we are not butchers for the council. Stand down. In the chaos that followed, Marcus and Kale made their way through the tunnels. The soldiers did not pursue behind them. Victoria made a choice that would change everything. She contacted Emma. She told the woman that help was needed. She told her to broadcast the truth immediately, before the council could order the soldiers to attack again. Emma's broadcast went out across all the colonies within the hour. The real history of Kale, the truth of what the dragon had done, the facts of what the Galactic Council had hidden. Humans heard the broadcast. Humans remembered. Humans began to question everything they had been told. And in the forest outside Clearwater, a boy and a dragon stood together under the stars. For the first time in 5,000 years, Kale was truly free, and for the first time in 3 years, Marcus was no longer alone. Marcus and Kale did not disappear into the wilderness to hide from the world. Instead, they chose to move through it, spreading the truth. They traveled from one settlement to another across the human colonies and beyond. They carried with them the necklace that had started everything. Wherever they went, Marcus would place the necklace around his neck and allow others to touch it, to feel for a moment the connection between boy and dragon, to experience the memories that Kale had stored there. The memories showed what the dragon had done. They showed the war against the Zytholthi. Showed 50 years of fighting against an enemy that seemed endless. They showed the choice that Kale had made to break the sacred laws of the Galactic Council, knowing that the price would be imprisonment and eternal exile. But they also showed something else. They showed that Kale had never regretted the choice, because the choice had been made for love. Humans who experienced those memories wept. They understood for the first time what they owed. They understood that their ancestors had been saved not by chance, but by the sacrifice of an ancient being who had chosen their survival over freedom. The Galactic Council tried to stop them. They issued orders that Marcus and Kale be captured and brought to justice for treason and conspiracy. But by then it was too late. The truth had spread across too many settlements. Humans everywhere were remembering elders who had kept forbidden histories hidden all their lives, began to speak. They brought out the books and records that families had protected for generations. They taught the children the real version of events. Council's authority began to crack not through violence or rebellion, but through the simple power of remembered truth. In the settlement of Westport, a group of miners refused to work. They would not continue to serve IRA's council that had lied to them for so long. In the agricultural colonies of the southern regions, farmers began to organize. They would not accept the council's authority anymore. They would govern themselves in the orbiting space stations. Engineers and technicians began to question the orders they received. They understood now that they had been tools of deception, settlement by settlement. Station by station, the grip of the Galactic Council began to loosen, and in the center of it all was Marcus and Kale, the boy who had been unwanted, the dragon who had been imprisoned. Together, they had become something the Council never expected they had become. Symbol, they had become proof that the official history was a lie. They had become a catalyst for change. Marcus discovered that he had a gift when he held the necklace. He could not only show others memories that Kale had stored there, he could also help them understand what those memories meant. He could guide them toward the truth, not through force or argument, but through understanding and compassion. Kale, freed from the burden of carrying truth alone, found new purpose. The dragon used its restored power to help rebuild the settlements that the Council had neglected. Kale moved rocks and created structures with incredible precision. The dragon used its intelligence to solve problems that human engineers had struggled with for years. But more importantly, Kale provided something that had been missing from human civilization for thousands of years. The dragon provided the living proof that younger races were not alone in the galaxy, that elder beings cared enough to sacrifice for them, that the universe was not cold and indifferent, but held within it the capacity for compassion. 2 years after Marcus freed Kale from the cave, the Galactic Council's authority over human settlements had effectively ended. Some colonies maintained communication and trade with the Council, but as equals, not as subjects. Others severed all ties and formed their own alliances. The human settlements that had once been scattered and weak began to unite. They formed federation based not on the dictates of an external authority, but on mutual respect and shared history. And they kept the necklace. It was no longer owned by Marcus. Instead, it was held by the Federation as their most precious possession. Every new generation of leaders, every young person who came of age, had the opportunity to touch the necklace and feel the connection to Kale, to experience the memories of sacrifice, to understand what true courage was. Marcus and Kale stood together one evening on a high hill, looking out across the galaxy. The boy had grown into a young man. The dragon had grown stronger with each day of freedom through their connection, which now required no necklace because the bond had become permanent. Marcus shared his thoughts with Kale. "We have finished what we started." The boy said no. Kale replied, "We have only begun. Out there in the darkness are other secrets waiting to be uncovered, other truths buried by time, and for other forgotten bonds between species. There may be other dragons imprisoned by unjust laws. There may be other humans crying out in darkness, not knowing that help exists. There may be other necklaces waiting to awaken." Marcus smiled. He had once been an unwanted boy with nothing. Now he had purpose. He had friendship. He had the knowledge that his life mattered, that his choices could change the course of history. He had Kale, who had waited 5,000 years for a moment like this. Together, they turned away from the settled worlds. Together, they moved toward the unknown. The necklace hung around Marcus's neck once more, warming against his chest in every fiber of the silver and stone. The memory of what they had done pulsed with life, and somewhere among the stars, humans carried forward the understanding that they had been loved enough to be saved. They carried forward the knowledge that sacrifice had been made for them. They carried forward the determination to never forget again, and they carried forward hope, because the boy who had been unchosen and the dragon who had been imprisoned had shown them that the unchosen could change the world, the unwanted could become legend, and the forgotten could rise again.